Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. Azad Chaiwala was featured in the Toronto Star for an online marriage site he founded called secondwife.com that connects Muslims seeking polygamous relationships. Azad Chaiwala says the website includes 3,600 Canadians as well as thousands of Britons, Americans, and Australians. Let's sit down with Dr. Shabir Ali to get his thoughts on this website and the purpose it's serving today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So what are your initial thoughts on a website called, the website that we just introduced, secondwife.com, and there's also polygamy.com that this founder, Azad Chaiwala, introduced to help men find women who are seeking polygamous relationships?
Well, the relationship between the two websites is not entirely clear. The secondwife.com says at the bottom, powered by polygamy.com. So it would seem as though polygamy.com is the original site and secondwife.com is a secondary site. Polygamy.com is more general in that it includes polyamorous relationships, or you might find articles, you will find articles on that site telling you how to have a successful polyamorous relationship. So that goes outside of the boundaries of Muslim thinking, because whereas in traditional Muslim thinking it was thought to be normal that a man could have up to 4 wives, it did not work the other way around. And of course, the Muslim thinking would not allow for open marriages and polyamorous relationships, just so that everyone is clear about what we mean by what we say. In classical Muslim definitions, it was thought to be permissible for a man to have up to 4 wives at one time. And divorce was considered to be not desirable, but in the final analysis permissible. But permission was not given for a woman to have several husbands at once. A woman could only be married to one man at one time. Open marriages were not allowed. So you could not have a situation where 2 persons are married to each other and they say to each other, well, honey, I don't care, who you go out with, so long as whatever we decide among ourselves, we agree to. So the 2 consent to be with each other, but allow for each to be with somebody else, and so on. So that's an open relationship. And then the polyamorous relationship is something similarly open, in that you don't necessarily have to be married to just one person, either male or female. You could be married to several others. A man could be married to multiple wives and some husbands at the same time. And by comparison, the woman can also be married to several husbands and several wives at the same time as well, and have several friends with benefits on the side, and so on. That's polyamorous or open relationships.
And I think that website they advertised, or in the article, in the Toronto article, it said it's catering to the non-Muslim population.
This is how it's mentioned in that article. Of course, this distinction is not made within the sites themselves. Yes. One goes to the site and one just sees, the first thing you see is a registration page where you put your own personal details before you can access any more information on the site. So I think that calls into question the organization behind this site, whether this is purely from an Islamic point of view or not. While we have good intentions about people, it is also important that we maintain reasonable cautions, especially when we're looking at something in the face that obviously is not Islamic, but is supposed to be Islamic.
Now, what are your thoughts on, because in the Toronto Star article, Azad Chaiwala points out that, in his eyes, he says this is legal in that it's a public site. But by law, by Canadian law, you can only be in a monogamous relationship. So if people are looking to, Muslim men are looking for a second wife, and they're going on this website, isn't that still are we still within the laws of the land?
This is for the legal experts to comment on. It seems to me from my humble research in this area that there is some grayness with regards to the legal status and the possibility of prosecution in case one gets married in this way. So just to be very clear, you have the Islamic ritual religious marriage that will be done following all of the classical religious codes. And side by side with that, you can have a civil marriage. So many Muslims at the time of marriage, they will be fulfilling all of the traditional Muslim requirements, and at the same time they will sign the legal documents that will register their marriage with the state, whether that is being done in Canada, United States of America, United Kingdom, or so on. Now, of course, all of these modern Western states that I've just mentioned, and many others, prohibit bigamy. And what they meant by that is for a person to be married to two spouses at the same time, but they're thinking in terms of the legal marriage, one registered with the state, where somebody goes, gets a license, registers a marriage, and then comes back later, gets another license, and registers the marriage again, without declaring that he was once already married. And this is only found out later, and this becomes the grounds of prosecution. And the prosecution is easily carried out because we have written documents showing that two marriages were registered for the same person at the same time. Now, what typically happens with Muslims and maybe some people, practitioners of other faiths that allow for polygamous marriages, is that a man may get married to the first wife and register his marriage as a civil marriage with the state in addition to his religious marriage. And so as far as the state is concerned, this man is legally married. But then he gets married to a second wife, or third or fourth, fulfilling all of the religious requirements, so that in his conscience he is quite clear that he is not doing anything outside of his religion and anything immoral, but he does not register the second, third, or fourth marriage with the state. And so the state does not have a way of proving that he is in a bigamous or polygamous relationship. Of course, proof can be gathered if one is really serious and determined enough to do that, but it's easier when you have a piece of paper to prove the case. And in this case, there's no piece of paper to prove the case.
And they're not choosing to register it, so...
Yes. But of course, many problems have been noticed arising from such marriages. From the Islamic point of view, one thing that becomes very obvious is that since for a Muslim man to have multiple wives, a basic requirement in classical Islamic jurisprudence is that he must treat them all equally. Now, naturally, there is an inequality here because the first wife has a legal status in the country in which the couple lives, but the second and third and fourth would not have that legal status and legal rights and protection of the state. And what we have noticed is that often complaints come to the Imam's office from women who have been married as a second or other wife, and the Imams cannot come to the woman's protection and help. Let's say, for example, the man being traditionally responsible for providing maintenance for his wife, and now he's not providing the maintenance. If this was a legal marriage, the matter could be brought to a legal court. Because it's only a religious marriage, it's brought to the Imam's office, and the Imam can only advise. He does not have the force of authority to exercise on the man and insist that he must pay up. And so many women are left without protection in cases like this. A couple of decades ago, in a meeting of the Council of Imams in the GTA area, we had decided that we, as a matter of principle, will not perform any such marriages. The only marriages we will perform is a marriage after the couple has brought to us the license from the city. And of course, with the stipulation that this will be registered with the city once all of the religious aspects are taken care of, so that the two marriages are performed the two sides of that same marriage are performed simultaneously, both the religious and the civil aspects of the marriage. And so it is a legal marriage, and that would prevent men from marrying second and third and fourth, not for the purpose of preventing that marriage itself, but because of the evils that we notice coming out of many such marriages, even though, of course, there may be some good ones and people may be happy in such relationships. But we have noticed many problems arising from the multiple marriages.
So that helps clarify. I want to take a different angle to this. So in the Toronto Star article, the founder mentions that 50% of the users, and this is specific to secondwife.com, 50% of users are women, and their wives are registering to seek out a second wife for their husbands. And historically, we did an earlier segment where we talked about historically why men were doing this. It was for the benefit of the community, to help orphans, etc., and widows. But how would you see this now, given that women, it seems, are playing an increased role in encouraging men in some ways to get a second or third or fourth
Well,
wife?
some of this information is coming from the website's founder, and obviously he would have a bias in presenting to us one side of the story. A very different side of the story was mentioned in an article by a Toronto Star writer in the year 2008. So this is not a new thing. We know of this phenomenon from a long time. And in that article, we see instances of women who have been deprived of their rights in such multiple marriage situations. And we need to evaluate both. There may be a few cases in which a woman may feel, okay, I'm not able to satisfy my husband in every way that I would like to, and I want my husband to be happy, and it looks like the way for him to be happy is to get him a second wife. Of course, some things can be taken to extremes. Karla Homolka considered her husband a king, and wanted to find young women for him, of course, to be raped and murdered in the end. Terrible tragedy. But you can have some Muslim women who, in a similar way, or non-Muslim women who feel, I want to help my husband. But those are few. What we find mostly to be the case is that women, like everybody else, have this sense of possession and ownership. This is my husband, this is my son, this is my wife, this is my daughter. We have these relationships and we know what's mine and what's not. And we generally don't like to share our things without necessity. I mean, there's some things that we share, like our wealth, for example, and some of our possessions. But the intimate relationship that is there within a marriage, this is held to be sacred and often is not shareable. In this way. So even though in classical Islamic times it was considered fine for a man, it's not immoral for a man to have a second wife, yet we find even among the wives of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there were instances of jealousy. So these were the best examples in our community, and they were still jealous of each other. It's just natural, nothing wrong with them. They're human beings, and that's how human beings generally are. So if you find in a community that there are few women who are welcoming this, there were many more who are suffering from this, and we need to come to their protection.
What about, and I've come across articles as well where it seems like it's more of a phenomenon in the UK where career-driven women are saying that they're okay with this kind of relationship because they don't want, quote unquote, a full-time husband, and they're focused on their career, so therefore they want a part-time husband. Now, how do you see this as? Does this compromise the sanctity of marriage, and how Islam views marriage?
Well, it's an interesting new development to see that this is being stated in this way. And again, I question the origin of this information. But assuming that there are a few women who want this to happen, to make this overblown as a phenomenon, create a website that will welcome people to register, it's not only catering for this, but it's catering also for the other side. If there's a woman who wants to be a part-time wife, what about this husband who is going to have several such part-time wives? He has to be a full-time husband. And of course, if you add up the parts, he's going to be more than a full-time husband. And he cannot be a part-time father, because if he has children from all of these multiple wives, then he has to be a full-time father with children who live at 4 different locations, for example. And he may not be able to fulfill that responsibility. It's very hard to think that in a modern society he will be able to fulfill that responsibility of training, teaching his kids, and bringing them up as good Muslims.
Thank you very much, as usual, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.